In this video, we will learn how to eliminate a potential cause of system instability by checking that your motherboard BIOS is up to date. We will learn how to identify what your current installed BIOS version is. Next, we will identify what motherboard and manufacturer model number you have. The third step will be to check if the motherboard is certified by AMD. And finally, we will go to the manufacturer's website to download and install the latest BIOS version.
So when the system boots up, the first thing it's going to do is to load up the BIOS. If the BIOS is out of date, it can often cause problems. So Tim, before we get on in looking at how we would make sure we understand whether the BIOS is the correct version or not, can you tell me why the BIOS is so important?
So the BIOS is a very low-level firmware, and so this sets up all of your hardware on your system so it all works correctly together before your system boots up and runs your operating system, such as Microsoft Windows or Linux or similar.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is see whether our BIOS is the correct version, because incorrect versions can often cause unstable systems. Is that right, Tim?
That's right. So if your BIOS isn't running properly or doesn't recognise your components correctly, they could run out of specification, they could overheat, they could run slowly, and this could cause lots of issues within your operating system.
Okay, so we switched our PC on and we're flashing up the BIOS here, and now we're in the BIOS. So Tim, can you walk me through what you're doing here?
So once we're into the BIOS, we would try to look for the system information area. Then in here, it will show us what our BIOS version is and what the date of the BIOS is, and any other information like processor type and the amount of memory on the system. Once you've got that information, we can then come out of the BIOS and go to the next step.
So now we have found out what version of BIOS we have, we need to understand what model number we have and what the motherboard is. So Tim, can you walk me through this, please?
So what we need to do now is to look at your motherboard, and somewhere on the motherboard will be the model number and the manufacturer name printed on there. So this could either be around the CPU socket itself or normally between some of the PCI Express slots. So you may need to move about inside the system to see these.
So the first thing we're going to do, Tim, is go to the AMD.com motherboard compatibility guide and to make sure that this motherboard is certified to work with the AMD product. So Tim, can you walk me through what you would do there here, please?
So once you're on the AMD products page, under the motherboards section, you can then refine your search results by the chipset or the socket. But here we're going to search for the manufacturer. So we'll just come down the list till we find ASUS, apply that as one of our search terms, and then we have all the certified boards listed by ASUS. And here we have the M4A79 Deluxe. And we just double check, look at the details about this board, and it's all there. So this is a certified board.
So now we're on the ASUS page, the drivers and download page, and the first thing we're going to do is to check to see whether the BIOS version in our existing system is up to date. So let's have a quick look, Tim. So we're going to do a search.
So now we're on the page here, you can select BIOS as a download, and then you can see which is the latest version here. Here we have the latest version, which is 3702.
And the BIOS version we detected in our system was 0801, so I guess clearly we're out of date. So
yes, this is a newer, higher version.
So we're going to want to go and update our board. So What's the next step, Tim? I guess we download that.
We will
right?
just click here to download and save the file to a handy location on our system.
Perfect. And how are we going to update this BIOS? What do we need to know?
So what we would do to update the BIOS is we would refer to ASUS's own instructions, which are in their manual, which I can show you here. So they've got a nice section under Chapter 3 in their motherboard manual about updating the BIOS, what to do, how to do it, what tools you need to use.
Perfect. So all the instructions are readily available. Now, I guess each motherboard manufacturer would have their own methods of updating the BIOS. Is that correct?
That's right. So, for example, Foxconn, they have their own different way of updating their BIOS, and again on their website they've got instructions of how to do it, what to look for, what tools you need, and let's say the same with Gigabyte as well. They've got their details of how you need to flash their BIOS in a particular way.
Okay, so sounds like the rule of the game is to use the instructions from the motherboard manufacturers once you know that your BIOS is out of date, and they will explain everything as to how to update your BIOS. Is that correct?
That's right. So you just need to make sure that you read all the instructions and you follow it through step by step. If you're not sure of what you're doing, it's always best to contact the motherboard manufacturer for extra advice.